In our headlines on this Thursday, December 19th, here in South Korea, the Constitutional Court says the president has yet to accept the legal documents it has been seeking to send ahead of his impeachment trial. And acting President Han Duck-soo vetoes 6 contentious bills unilaterally passed by opposition lawmakers at the parliament. Meanwhile, the U.S. Federal Reserve cuts its interest rates by 0.25 percentage points, but has projected fewer reductions next year. The Constitutional Court claims the president is rendering difficult the due process of serving legal documents by refusing to accept them. Our Peunji reports.
The Constitutional Court, which has started to discuss the early stages of President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment trial, said Thursday that it has again failed to deliver legal documents to Yoon's residence as the president refuses to accept them. This is the third time that the president has refused to receive documents related to his impeachment trial. The Constitutional Court has been repeatedly sending such documents to both the presidential office and Yoon's residence, but all have gone undelivered. The court said Thursday that if President Yoon continues to refuse to accept these documents, it will announce its position on Monday on whether the president's action should be regarded as deemed delivery. Meanwhile, Seok Dong-hyun, a lawyer for President Yoon and his longtime friend, said Yoon never ordered anyone to be arrested on the night of the martial law.
The president himself is also a lawyer. From what I've heard, he never used terms such as arrest or drag someone out.
His remarks come after military and intelligence officials have said President Yoon gave orders to arrest lawmakers, including prominent political figures, such as the ruling party leader Han Dong-un and the main opposition party leader Lee Jae-myung. According to the National Intelligence Service Deputy Director, Yoon reportedly said they must use this chance to arrest them and wipe them out when martial law was imposed. In a separate briefing earlier in the day, President Yoon's attorney also told reporters that Yoon never considered or agreed with the idea of insurrection.
As a president, he has neither considered nor agreed with the crime of insurrection. Since he has never had such thoughts, it would be regarded that he does not agree with those thoughts.
Seok also said Yoon is willing to represent himself in legal proceedings related to his brief imposition of martial law. He added that although Yoon remains apologetic for declaring martial law on December 3rd, he has a clear and confident position on the issues. After President Yoon was suspended from his duties following the parliament's vote last Saturday, all eyes are now on whether the Constitutional Court will remove him from office or restore his presidential powers. Peunji, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, questions have been raised within the prosecutor's office about the wisdom of transferring the insurrection investigation to the Corruption Investigation Office. Our Kim Jung-sil explains.
The investigation into the December 3rd martial law has taken a new turn. On Wednesday, the prosecution transferred the case to the Corruption Investigation Office for High-Ranking Officials, or the CIO. The move follows concerns over overlapping investigations with the prosecution, police, and the CIO all handling the same case. Officials stated that the transfer was meant to prevent further complications and address concerns about the legitimacy of the charges. However, after the decision was made, there was reportedly resistance within the prosecution's special investigation team as they claimed to have made significant progress and were frustrated by the sudden change. The transfer case includes allegations of treason against President Yoon Suk-yeol and former Safety Minister Lee Sang-min. While the CIO will now lead the investigation, it does not have the power to charge a sitting president. If evidence is found, the case will be referred back to the prosecution for formal charges. Meanwhile, the investigation continues to focus on the military's role during the martial law period. Around 1,500 soldiers were deployed with rifles, sniper rifles, tasers, and drone jamming devices, along with 10,000 rounds of live ammunition. 100 military vehicles and 12 helicopters were also involved in the operation. Earlier this week on Tuesday, police made a second attempt to raid the presidential office for crucial communication records, but once again, their efforts were blocked by security. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
And some 24 officials and presidential aides failed to show up at opposition-arranged parliamentary hearings slated for this Thursday at the National Assembly, citing state affairs. Our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo has more.
All 22 key government officials includes aides to President Yoon, who were requested to appear at the National Assembly on Thursday to answer lawmakers' questions about the December 3rd declaration of martial law, chose not to show up.
Our committee intended to check the facts regarding the current serious situation by requesting the attendance and asking questions of officials, including the Chief of Staff to the President, the National Security Advisor, the Director of National Policy, and the Chief of the Presidential Security Service, but none of them are in attendance. I cannot but deplore the behavior of the presidential office.
The House Steering Committee, which was boycotted by the ruling People Power Party members, rescheduled the questioning to December 30th. The absentee officials were once again notified that they should appear on that day. Lawmaker Park Kyung-soo, the PPP chief deputy floor leader, told reporters on Thursday that the ruling party and the presidential office have decided not to participate in a session unilaterally scheduled by the Democratic Party. He added that the presidential office is currently busy reporting to acting President Han Duck-soo, and therefore officials there were unable to attend the session. This, as National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik held a press conference with foreign correspondents and reiterated the Assembly's determination to facilitate the procedure of the impeachment trial of President Yoon and have democracy fully restored in the country, thanks to the South Korean people who support them.
The source of the resilience of South Korea's democracy is these people, and this is why South Korea is strong.
Speaker Woo also shared that he sent letters to parliamentary leaders following the emergency at the Assembly earlier this month and said he will continue to make efforts to enhance parliamentary diplomacy. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Acting President Han Duck-soo has vetoed 6 disputed bills unilaterally passed by opposition lawmakers at the parliament. Our Oh Soo-young reports.
Acting President Han Duck-soo decided to veto 6 contentious bills forced through by the opposition party, but with a heavy heart as the government seeks closer cooperation with Parliament. This came at a special cabinet meeting on Thursday called by the interim leader, who exercised his right to request a reconsideration of bills passed at the National Assembly in November, having assumed executive powers while President Yoon Suk-yeol faces impeachment proceedings. The bills include the opposition Democratic Party's measures to stabilize prices of rice, agricultural and fishery products, and revise legislative powers. Explaining his decision, Han said mandatory rice purchases by the government would not stabilize prices, but only worsen excess supply and lead to a decline in prices. Meanwhile, overcompensating agricultural and fisheries production beyond disaster relief could lead to moral hazard. He also said the revisions to the National Assembly Act could hinder the smooth execution of the budget, while adjustments to the Act on testimonies and appraisals could violate individual freedoms. Han said his decision was made after much contemplation, as cooperation between the government and the ruling and opposition parties is more critical than ever. The opposition expressed discontent over the veto. Floor leader Park Chan-dae accused Han of disregarding public sentiment, warning if he abuses his veto power, he would face the consequences. However, the opposition is putting more emphasis on 2 particular bills it railroaded through last week. A bill to launch a special counsel investigation into First Lady Kim Gun-hee's alleged misconduct, and a bill seeking a special counsel probe into President Yoon Suk-yeol over his imposition of martial law. The DP has also been ramping up pressure on Han to fill up the 3 vacancies at the Constitutional Court to make up a full 9-member panel. 6 votes are required to impeach President Yoon, which as of now would require a unanimous decision. The acting president has to tread carefully as he aims to promote cooperation with the majority-holding opposition, which has threatened to seek Han's impeachment as well. He has before January 1st to decide whether or not to veto the special counsel bills. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
South Korea and Japan have reaffirmed their commitment to strengthening bilateral ties as well as the trilateral partnership with the U.S. Intentions to this end were shared during talks between acting President Han Duck-soo and Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba earlier this morning. They also agreed to promote preparations for their 60th anniversary of diplomatic relations next year and to maintain trilateral security coordination with the U.S. in light of threats posed by North Korea and its military cooperation with Russia. Now, with regard to domestic politics, Mr. Han reassured the Japanese Prime Minister about the role of the rule of law in addressing the current fallout of Korea's short-lived martial law. And speaking of reassurance, the country's top economic official continues to ease concerns over Korea's financial markets. Our correspondent Lee Soo-jin has details.
The government is moving to ensure that finance markets remain in stable territory after the passing of the second impeachment vote against President Yoon. A sharp drop was previously seen in domestic stock markets in the days after President Yoon's unexpected declaration of martial law and its swift reversal. But this Monday, after the second impeachment vote on Saturday, the Kospi opened up, moving past the 2,500 mark and continued climbing before gradually stabilizing. Although it closed down on Monday, on Wednesday the benchmark index closed up more than 1% thanks to foreign investors turning to net buyers for the first time since the initial impeachment attempt. The Korean currency, however, has been slightly more volatile, closing past the 1,410 mark to the dollar the day after the brief imposition of martial law. And it surpassed the 1,430 mark after the failed first impeachment attempt and has remained in that range even after the second impeachment motion passed. But according to one expert, the fluctuations in the exchange rate are not severe enough to warrant extreme concern.
The Korean won has weakened to around 1,400 against the US dollar, which is around what it was during the 1997 Asian financial crisis and the 2008 financial crisis. But the factors behind are different, so as long as it doesn't surpass the 1,450 mark, you can say it's stable.
He also emphasized the importance of the government's role in building confidence in the country's economic system, which was in line with what Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok said during a rare joint press conference with foreign media on Wednesday.
Given ongoing market volatility due to domestic and external uncertainties, the government will work with all sectors to stabilize the economy, prioritizing external credibility.
To enhance credibility, the government will continue to operate a 24-hour monitoring system for the finance markets and boost incentives for foreign investments. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has lowered its benchmark interest rate by 25 basis points for the third time in a row this year, while forecasting a more cautious approach that is next year. Our Moon Hye-ryun covers this latest cut.
The Fed has cut rates once again despite slower than expected progress made on inflation in the United States. On Wednesday, local time, following the last Federal Open Market Committee meeting of the year, Fed policymakers slashed the benchmark interest rate by 25 basis points, bringing it down to the 4.25 to 4.5% range. The latest action brings the total cut made since September to 1 full percentage point and comes despite inflation continuing to remain stubbornly above the Fed's 2% target. The U.S. Consumer Price Index jumped 2.7% in November compared to the same month last year, showing an upward trend to the year-on-year jumps in the index.
We know that reducing policy restraint too fast or too much could hinder progress on inflation. At the same time, reducing policy restraint too slowly or too little could unduly weaken economic activity and employment.
Fed officials also made some adjustments to their forecasts for next year, projecting a slower pace of rate cuts compared to its September forecast, as well as persisting inflation. By the end of 2025, they see 2 rate deductions of 25 basis points each, which is half a percentage point less than what they anticipated 3 months ago. Inflation forecasts also jumped from 2.1% to 2.5%. These are the first projections since Donald Trump was elected the next president of the United States, and Powell remarked that it is premature to make any conclusions on how possible tariffs could affect consumer inflation. Following the Fed's decision, Wall Street tumbled with the Dow Jones falling for the 10th day straight to mark its longest downward slope since 1974. The tech-heavy Nasdaq and benchmark S&P 500 also tallied their largest drops in months. South Korean stocks and currency also fell, with the won surpassing the 1,450 to the dollar mark for the first time since the financial crisis of 2009. The Kospi closed 1.95% lower at 2,435.93, while the Kosdaq closed 1.89% down. This latest decision from the Fed brings the interest rate gap between South Korea and the US back down to 1.5 percentage points, after it widened to 1.75 percentage points in September. Finance authorities, including the country's finance minister and the Bank of Korea's governor, held a meeting on Thursday morning to discuss these developments and the domestic economic situation. The finance ministries and central banks said they would continue to operate an around-the-clock system to monitor the foreign exchange market and pledge to do their best to stabilize financial markets. 문혜련, Arirang News.
In other news, at least 100 North Korean troops deployed to support Russia in the battlefield against Ukraine have been killed and about 1,000 injured. Now, this is according to the South Korean National Intelligence Service earlier this Thursday during a closed-door briefing to the Parliamentary Intelligence Committee. With regard to the reason behind the relatively high rate of casualty, authorities cited the inability of North Korean soldiers to respond to drone attacks and their positioning, that is, on the front lines of the war. They also shared intelligence about Kim Jong-un's presence at military training grounds, hinting at the possibility of additional troop deployments. In return, Russia is expected to modernize North Korea's conventional weapons. And the Unification Ministry here has condemned North Korea for its rejection of a joint statement sharing international concerns about its military cooperation with Moscow. The joint statement adopted earlier this week by South Korea, the US, the EU and 8 other nations linked the military agreement between Pyongyang and Moscow to violations of multiple UN Security Council resolutions and to reckless escalation of the Kremlin's war against Ukraine. In response, North Korea's foreign ministry denounced the statement, dismissing it as slandering normal cooperative relations. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met with NATO and European Union leaders in Brussels on Wednesday. On the agenda were ways to bolster Ukraine's air defense and post-war recovery strategies. This latest interaction comes amid uncertainty over U.S. military support for Ukraine against Russian invasion under a second Trump administration. Meanwhile, President Zelensky is also scheduled to attend the EU summit on Thursday. Moscow has warned Washington against, quote, geopolitical games that place pressure on nations such as Russia, China and North Korea, which all possess nuclear weapons. According to Russian state media, Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov claimed Washington was seeking to maintain its global dominance by recklessly pressuring countries that have nuclear weapons, which could have disastrous consequences. Yet on a more amiable note, he also spoke of Moscow willing to normalize relations with Washington under the incoming U.S. administration. And the U.S. Senate has approved a critical defense policy bill for next year that also includes intentions to maintain the current size of U.S. military presence in South Korea. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
The U.S. Senate on Wednesday passed the National Defense Authorization Act for the 2025 fiscal year, with 85 votes in favor and 14 against. The bill, worth $895.2 billion, also includes provisions to maintain the current level of U.S. troops stationed in South Korea. According to the NDAA, the budget allows for the maintaining of approximately 28,500 U.S. Forces Korea troops, strengthening the mutual defense industrial base and reaffirming extended deterrence commitment, utilizing all U.S. defense capabilities. The Pentagon was also ordered to report on plans to strengthen the U.S. extended deterrence commitment to South Korea and ways to advance defense cooperation between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. The passage of the budget bill also comes almost a month before President-elect Donald Trump's return to the Oval Office. Trump has previously threatened to pull U.S. troops out of South Korea and has demanded that Seoul increases its contribution to the cost of stationing USFK troops. Meanwhile, top Democrats and Republicans at the U.S. Congress reached an agreement on Wednesday on a continuing resolution preventing a possible government shutdown just before the start of the new U.S. administration. The bill allows for the federal agencies to be funded through March 14th. The stopgap measure would keep the roughly $6.2 trillion federal budget running at its current level and also includes a $100.4 billion package in new emergency funding to help states like North Carolina and Florida recover from recent natural disasters. While the vote is likely to pass, should lawmakers fail to act in time, the government would enter a partial shutdown beginning on Saturday. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
China, meanwhile, has been expanding its nuclear arsenal, and as of May this year, it reportedly has over 600 operational nuclear warheads. Now, this is according to an annual report on China's military power by the Pentagon released on Wednesday. U.S. officials also believe China will possess over 1,000 nuclear warheads by the year 2030. Meanwhile, regarding China's military modernization goal for 2027, the country has seen, quote, uneven progress as cases of corruption have reportedly disrupted progress.
The cold spell continued today as the temperature this morning in Seoul was minus 6.7 degrees Celsius, which is the lowest temperature this winter so far. However, the temperature rose to 5 degrees with clear skies during the day. It is easy to catch a cold with these sudden temperature changes, so please take care. With the lowest temperatures this winter in various parts of western regions, currently a cold wave advisory is issued in northern parts of Gyeonggi-do province and some areas in Gangwon-do province. However, this cold spell will slow down a bit until Saturday morning, which is Dongji on the lunar calendar. Tomorrow, Seoul, Gwangju, and Daegu will start off at minus 2 degrees, Chuncheon minus 7. Highs will move up to 4 degrees in Seoul, Busan 10 degrees. Starting with western parts of the country tomorrow afternoon, more snow is expected in most parts of the country on Saturday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session, and today we touch upon the security implications of the political uncertainty here.